Welcome to the Ryan's Leadership Lessons podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Stemen. My goal of this podcast is to give you one leadership lesson at a time while leaning in on my experience managing people and projects, being on a nonprofit board, and experience on multiple sports teams. I'm also creating this podcast as a companion to my LinkedIn newsletter with the same title, Ryan's Leadership Lessons. Okay, let's jump into episode 3 about Aesop's Fables and how it applies to leadership lessons. So I thought I would create this podcast plus the newsletter on Aesop's Fables because so many people can relate to them. The fables have been around since 600 years before Christ. So if you think about ancient Greek scriptures and things that are passed down, it's usually passed down maybe by a scribe that wrote it down on a parchment paper. Maybe it's just somebody that's sitting around a campfire that actually talked about these lessons and these fables, and they were used and traveled from ancient Greek to present day United States. But all over the world, we find these oral tradition stories passed down and then the lessons. And the cool thing about Aesop's Fables is they can be applied to leadership lessons. They can be applied to all sorts of lessons, but specifically what we're going to talk about is kind of 7 takeaways of Aesop's Fables and how it applies to leadership. Um, and in the newsletter, I talk about the power of humility. That's where I start with the tortoise and the hare. I think is the most iconic Aesop fable, right? You have this hare that's kind of trash talking the tortoise, saying, "I'm going to beat you in this race," and the tortoise is sort of a slow and steady wins the race kind of person. And I think you see that in business, and I think you see that in not just corporate America, but I think you also see it in sports too. You see the trash talking team or the team that's very confident in themselves, and it's usually the team, whether it's sports or business or nonprofit, that's kind of just slowly working away, slowly chipping away at a project or a product or a project. They're just slowly chipping away, and they're quietly working behind the scenes. And lo and behold, they create the best product. Lo and behold, they create the long-lasting piece of software, or they create the long-lasting project that has a 10-year time horizon versus this kind of shot in the pan, flash in the pan hair where it's like, there's confidence, there's cockiness, this product or this project is going to be awesome, and then that flops, right? So you can kind of think about it from that perspective. And I think the tortoise and the hare is one of those lessons that continues on generation after generation, year after year, and it can be applied in different ways. And so that's why I started it off for my newsletter as the first one. The other one is the farmer and the viper, which I think is not as well known in the United States, but maybe has a great quality to it. So a farmer rescues a venomous viper snake from the cold. He looks out, he sees this snake in the grass. It's cold. He takes it in home and he warms it by the fire. He warms up this snake, and in return, the viper bites the farmer, right, fatally poisoning him. And as the farmer succumbs to the venom, he asks the viper, "Why did you harm someone that showed you kindness?" And the viper coldly responds that it is the nature to bite, illustrating that one's inherent traits may override external influence. And so the leadership lesson there is it basically revolves around the importance of discernment in leadership and understanding the nature of those who you collaborate with and work with, that not everyone is going to have good intentions when you're working with them, whether that's on a sports team or that's in business or that's in a nonprofit. You can approach things from a discernment, in the sense that kind of prove that you can work with this person, you can trust them, right? You don't just trust fully and think that this person is going to do everything in their power to help you and work with you. You have to kind of work with that person a bit to understand, can I trust this person to get the job done and do it in a manner we want? So if you think about that, like, this farmer just completely trusts the snake, and he brings the snake into his house, and then the snake bites him and kills him. But during that time, he's like, "Yeah, why would you do that?" And so it proves out, like, you have to be discerning, right? And think about who you're trusting and putting your trust in when you're working with somebody or you're on a team with someone. Think about that trust building exercise. So that was the second one, trust and discernment. First one we talked about was power of humility. Tortoise versus the hare. And the third one what we're going to talk about is unity and collaboration and leadership, and that's the bull and the lion. And we'll talk about that. So it's a group of bulls are grazing peacefully in a field. Each one's confident in the ability to fend off any threat. Like, hey, we can fend off anything. We're a bunch of bulls that are in this pasture. We can fend off any animal that comes in here. But a lion easily overpowers and consumes one of the bulls, one by one. So he starts going in there. The lion gets in this pen and starts eating basically each of these bulls one at a time. And the bulls realize the fatal consequences of their individualistic approach. Rather than collaborating and working together to keep the lion out of their pasture or out of their from eating all their friends, they were using an individualistic approach, and they were cocky and thinking that would never, it never happened to us. We're bulls. We're never going to be overtaken. And lo and behold, this lion comes in and just starts overwhelming each bull one at a time and eating them. And so the moral of the story is they eventually come together and they start to confront the lion as a united front, and they successfully drive it away. But it took them a while to do that. So the leadership lesson there is like thinking about this fable. Think about the power of collaboration. You may be an individual contributor who's really good at your job, but if there's a project that needs your help, you can work with people that are maybe mediocre at their job, good at their job, okay at their job, maybe below average. And if you work together, maybe you can bring out the best in each of those individuals, and you can collaborate on a project that's going to be successful as a whole, right? And you look at that with sports teams, right? So like I think about the 1990s Chicago Bulls, for example. Michael Jordan is by far one of the best basketball players of all times, and he's well known for taking them to multiple championships. But you have all these other players that were helping him along the way, Dennis Rodman and Scottie Pippen, for example. And all these players that are around Michael Jordan to make his championship run. It wouldn't happen without those collaborative team building exercises of all the other players, the other 5 starters and the bench players, to get them to the championship. And you see that with sports teams. You see it with football teams. It's not just the quarterback that is successful. It's the front line. It's all the other players that are on there. It's the defensive players that win the game for them. So you think about collaboration as a whole rather than individualistic. Yes, you personally may be an individual contributor, but when you're working on a project, think about how much good you can bring out in others. Think about how you can help others rise above and become better at their jobs. I think about my own role. I think about how I can help others. And sometimes, I go into meetings and I think, how can I help this person succeed in whatever they're trying to do and accomplish? Even if it doesn't impact me financially or otherwise, I want to see the company do well. I want to see our partners do well. I want to see our customers do well. I want to see the individuals that I'm working with, my coworkers, do well. So try to collaborate and not think as an individual, like the bulls grazing and the lion who overwhelmed a few of them before they started to become collaborative. So number 4 is the wisdom and unity, and that's the bundle of sticks fable. And what the bundle of sticks fable is, the father gives his son a valuable lesson by presenting him with a bundle of sticks and asking him to break it up. I think actually it's multiple sons. So he's presenting these guys a bundle of sticks, and he says, hey, break up these sticks. And the son's attempting to break the bundle individually. They find it difficult. However, when the father unties the bundle and each son can break a single stick, they easily break them down, right? Instead of like an entire bundle breaking at a time, they decide, let's just break it one at a time. Makes it a lot easier. The father's message is clear. There's strength in unity. So as you bring a bundle together, it's hard to break that bundle together. And same thing with number 3. There's strength in being collaborative. There's strength in being unified, right? So if you think about being unified together, it's you become very, very strong. You think about teams that are unified. You think that product messaging that's unified is very strong. You think about marketing that's unified is strong around a brand. It's hard to break that up. right? So if you have it all together, it's hard to break it. If it's individual, it's easy to break apart. So when you put those things together, think about that. Especially when you're working on a project, it's way easier to be unified and working together. It's hard to break down that project when you have so many solid people working together in tandem. So that was number 4, and we'll go through the 5th one, which is called clever leadership. So this is the fox and the crow fable, and the story is a fox possesses a piece of cheese and perches on a branch, and a cunning fox observes the situation and decides to flatter the crow, praising its appearance, saying, "Wow, you're looking great up there," as the crow, and the crow is swayed by the flattery and opens its beak and then inadvertently drops the cheese down to the fox. And the fox seizes the opportunity, takes the cheese, and leaves the crow, who was gullible to the situation, right? So the fox knew exactly what he was doing. The crow was up there thinking, "All right, I have this cheese, I'm getting ready to eat it, but this fox gave me a compliment, and I've completely been flustered, and I've lost my focus." In the leadership world, you can glean this fable in the sense that it revolves around the need for leaders to be discerning and not easily swayed by flattery, right, and manipulation. And if you think about anything in sales, like there's a lot of flattery that goes into selling a product, right? And so you have to be discerning. You have to think about, like, okay, what's this manipulation? What's this person selling me? Why are they sending me gifts, or why are they being so nice to me? Well, it's because they want to sell you something. So you have to be kind of discerning. You have to kind of have a filter on things to think about, is someone being clever to be manipulative, or are they being actually genuinely nice to me? So think about that when you're, as a leader, kind of look through that discerning eyeglass of, like, hey, is this person true? Do they have true intentions for what they're doing, or are they trying to flatter me to sell me something, or to catch me off guard? So think about that. In the newsletter, I talk about The Boy Who Cried Wolf. I think we've all heard of that one, and the leadership around accountability. And then I talk about adaptability and innovation, the ant and the grasshopper. And the ant and the grasshopper is a great one in the sense that, the ant is spending all summer gathering and storing food for the winter. In contrast, the carefree grasshopper is, just relaxing and frolicking and enjoying life and not saving up for the winter. And then when winter comes, they're prepared. They have a stockpile of food. They're ready for, hard times. And the grasshopper is facing hardship and hunger and has to go to the ants and ask for help. And I think you can kind of approach this in the sense that, I think there's a lot of businesses out there that are at a razor's edge. Maybe they've taken on a lot of debt and they haven't sold their products well. And meanwhile, you may have a company on the other side that's doing really well. Their finances are great. They've been very thriftful in their spending. They haven't spent tons of money on frivolous items. And during a recession or hard times, they're ready because they have a great balance sheet. They've thought about things from a good times and bads. They've thought about what that would look like from a strategic perspective, so they're ready for those bad times. And then you have other businesses that weren't. They were spending frivolously on merchandise or T-shirts for their employees, or they were just spending lavishly internally, but not thinking about tomorrow or the next quarter or the next year or a recession down the road. Whereas the other business is acting like an ant, and it's stockpiling, and it's thinking about, how do we get the balance sheet in a good place so that if there are hard times, we're ready for it? Or how do we be more thriftful with our dollars today so we're successful tomorrow? That comes down. I think that's the best part of that fable is it comes down to planning and being strategic. And I think that's what makes a really good nonprofit board, a really good business, a really good team, is you play for today, you work for today, and you work toward today's goals. But you think about tomorrow and the next day and the next quarter and 5 quarters from now and 6 quarters from now. And then you start thinking about, okay, 5 years, 10 years from now, where do we want to be with our products? And so think about those things and be strategic. And even as an individual, you can be strategic, right? So think about your own career. Where do you want your career to be? work hard today, make the right decisions today, but start to think about, okay, where do I want my career to be? Do I want to be managing people tomorrow? Do I want to be working with multiple customers tomorrow? What do you want to do with your career, and think about those things strategically long term. So I think the ant and the grasshopper is a great fable. I tried to keep some classic ones in there, and then I tried to bring in some ones that maybe are not as classic for our U.S. audience. But the cool thing about Aesop's fables is, again, uh, they think they're not sure who Aesop was. He could have been a slave. He could have been a storyteller. He was certainly a storyteller because his fables are existing today. But they think he's, was born sometime 600 years before Christ. So you're looking at like 620 BCE, and they're not really quite sure who the person was. So, but the cool thing is the messages last the test of time. The messages can be applied to anything. Um, Leadership could be applied to school, could be applied to sports. It has applications for different sources and points of truth. So I thought I would use that as Aesop's Fables as a good newsletter and podcast. Just think about these things. I'll just touch on them real quickly. The 7 key takeaways from Aesop's Fables that I brought into this newsletter and to this podcast: the power of humility, the tortoise and the hare; the trust and discernment in leadership, the farmer and the viper; number 3, the unity and collaboration in leadership, the bulls and the lion; wisdom and unity, the bundle of sticks, first one stick; and then the clever leadership, the fox and the crow, about gullibility and being clever. And then leadership accountability, the boy who cried wolf. I think everyone's heard that fable. They understand that one. And then the last one is adaptability and innovation. So, and I could even probably reword that to be strategy and thinking 10 steps ahead. The ant and the grasshopper, if you think about having a long-term approach. But there is a good book called Aesop and the CEO by David Noonan, and it basically applies some early 2000 business case studies against Aesop's Fables, and it's really kind of a unique lessons of different business situations, and it applies Aesop's Fables. And then obviously Aesop's Fables you can find at any library or bookstore, both in the illustrated version, and then obviously there's plenty of online content on Aesop's Fables over the years. And I hope you enjoy this podcast, and I hope you have a great day ahead.